This, I can't believe I'm putting it on my favorites, honestly, because it ruined my life. And I can't say that the books are good. How do I explain this? Hello, welcome to the video. How are you doing? I'm extra excited to start this video because in the course of me preparing for this, coming up with my list of my favorite books of the year, I read 2 books that are potentially my favorite books, definitely of like this half of the year. So April was a really not awesome reading month for me, and I think March as well was kind of bumpy. So May is coming in real strong. I've got a lot of great books this month. We're going to talk about, I think, just 2 of them, but for my reading wrap up, 기대해줘. Okay, so yeah, you've read the title, you know why we're here. I'm going to be telling you about my favorite books so far this year, the first 5 months, in case any of you guys are hitting a slump. I feel like a lot of people said that April was a bad reading month, so I'm here to give you some recommendations so that May, June, July, your summer will look a lot brighter. Before we completely dive in, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace. My love, been using them for years. Squarespace is a place to host your online presence. I personally use it for a blog, but they have so many features that allow you just a lot of freedom in terms of what you want to do with your website. I personally really love their analytics system, but they now also have something called Squarespace Blueprint, which helps you with your design. They have new updated SEO tools as well. It's also great. Not only can you add monetization features in terms of like a shop for selling items, they now also really help you if you're trying to sell any kind of a course. You can have like a video library or whatever you need and then have a paywall for anyone who is trying to access that course. It's just anything you really want. Squarespace can help you do it. So you can go to squarespace.com right now for a free trial, and then you can use my link down below, squarespace.com/cari can read, to get 10% off of your first purchase. So thank you as always to Squarespace, and let's dive into the list. I cannot wait to talk about these books. Best books so far of 2024. Weirdly, I'm seeing a theme. Okay, maybe it's only 3 or 4 books. I'm reading a lot of books about like hell and gods that maybe aren't really good gods, and setting the tone is Library at Mount Char. This was a book that I just really enjoyed. I had heard a lot about it in the sense of people thought it was really strange. People thought that it was very disturbing and maybe even confusing. And that's it. That's all I knew. And it had the word library in the title. So I was sort of like, okay, this sounds like a book for me. And yeah, I was right. I do recommend, well, do I? I recommend going into it knowing any kind of triggers if that bothers you, because this was an extremely violent book. And I've said it before, but violence in every form. So I would go into it knowing that. But in terms of the plot, I don't want to tell you too much because the way that it unfolds is part of the joy of reading it. There's a giant butterfly trying to get into my house. No. Sorry, not today. Okay, I thought that it's as big as a crow. Okay, it's gone. The Library at Mount Char, we mainly follow our main character who has my full name, which is a jarring experience that I don't recommend. Her name is Carolyn. My full name is Carolyn. Yes, not Caroline. So we follow Carolyn, who is raised in this home with a bunch of her adopted brothers and sisters, and their father raised them to each have some kind of specialty. So, for example, her brother learns everything about war and violence. That's his thing. He knows it. Everything you can imagine. That's his specialty. We have another girl who is all about healing, but they all focus on different things and never shall they meet. There's one of her brothers knows everything about the animal kingdom, and so he's able to speak to every animal, and he prefers to live in the woods and all of this stuff, things like that. But they're never allowed to share their knowledge because that would be similar to kind of the Tower of Babel. No human, no one person should know everything that God knows. Depending on who you talk to, their father is a god or just the head of a terrorist organization. He has gone missing. What do we do? So at first reading it, I was just really interested in understanding like, what is this life? Like the whole setup of their world and where they lived and stuff like that was just so interesting to me. Then once we started on the actual plot, it got darkly funny. And then it got quite sad and philosophical. I thought that the ending was so sadly beautiful, but also just it's truly a mess of a book in the best way. I have compared it to the feeling I got with Nona the Ninth of the Locked Tomb series, like Gideon Harrow, Nona the Ninth, that kind of discussion of what if God isn't this all-knowing, benevolent being? It's just a guy. I really enjoy books like that, and so this really was just such a wild read and very unique and just a good time. But again, extremely gory, violent, but I really enjoyed The Library at Mount Char. After that, I read The English Understand Wool. I actually saw this recommended by Anne Patchett, I believe is how you pronounce her last name, who wrote Bel Canto, who wrote recently Tom Lake. She owns a bookstore and she has a TikTok. And I happened upon one of her videos where she was talking about how she enjoys going into bookstores and asking the booksellers, what is a book that is currently flying off the shelves? And she said that wherever it was, some, indie bookstore in New York that she loves, and the booksellers told her that they could not keep The English Understand Wool on the shelf. Everyone was buying it. And so Anne was like, I gotta know. And I was like, me too. So it's only about 60 to 70 pages. It's a very short book. I would love to see this turned into a movie, honestly. It has somewhat of an unreliable narrator. And I just thought that the entire book, the way that it ends, it just felt like I keep saying that it felt really satisfying, and that's really what it felt like. There was just something about that ending where I was like, yes, that is how the story ends. It's not gonna live with me forever. I felt like, wow, she really just how do I describe this in a way that isn't just repeatedly saying that it felt really satisfying? There was just something about the way that it ended that when I closed the book, I was just like, she did it, We follow a girl who has been raised by her parents in extreme privilege. They are the kind of wealthy that you can't even imagine, like the top 1% of the top 1%. Until one day, her mom disappears. Subsequently, her father disappears. We start to unravel maybe the secrets behind her life. She also, because this is such a huge international scandal that these bazillionaires disappeared, she gets offered a book deal. And so we are learning about what happened kind of as she's telling us about constructing her memoir. So a lot of it is letters back and forth with her editor that she really doesn't like. And so it was just a really interesting way of telling the story. And then again, that ending was just great job. I really appreciate people who can tell stories in a short amount of time, whether that's a standalone book or a short story. And this really did it. I recommend. I think if you're in a reading slump and you can't commit to a book that's longer than 100 pages, The English Understand Wool. And then speaking of shorter books, another one is Untethered Sky. I talked about this I guess I just read it last month. This is by Fonda Lee, who wrote the Jade City, or just Jade City, the Jade City, the trilogy. This is a fantasy following a girl who is raising I forget their names exactly, but it's like a giant bird. And in this kingdom, there are these monsters that roam the countryside attacking humans, and it is the job of these human and bird teams to go around and kill the monsters. I personally thought just the way that it unfolded, and then especially the ending, it was very unique for that kind of story, especially when I feel like recently, or just maybe in the past year, I've read a lot of books that are fantasy related that have a lot of human and mythical beast team kind of things, like Fireborn, for example, where we have soldiers that use dragons and things like that. I think that this did something quite different. I feel like it was very subtle because it was so short. We didn't get really deep into the characters. So even though there is romance, there is a slight sense of betrayal, a little bit of not political intrigue, but we go into some politics, and you couldn't really sink your teeth into it because the story was moving so quickly and it wasn't necessarily about that. But for some reason, I just really enjoyed the voice, the imagery, our main character, and especially that ending. That is Untethered Sky. After that, we have, I don't know why I'm so hooked on this book. Like, thinking back, I wasn't shaken by this book, rocked to my core by this book, but I keep thinking about it, and without even questioning myself, I put it on my favorites list. So I guess it had an effect on me, and I did even buy the physical after reading the arc. So I don't think this is a book for everyone. I will preface it with that. I feel like the other books, if you tend to like what I normally like, you will also like these books, but this one is going to be a hit or miss for people. And that is Fragile Animals. This is definitely more for the like lit fic girlies. Technically there's a vampire, but I would not say that this has any fantasy element whatsoever. Fragile Animals. Fragile Animals is about a woman who is a writer, and she decides, as she's working on her second collection of poetry, she needs to get away. She's got issues at home. She's got issues just in her head that she needs to work through. Let's go to this middle of nowhere island. She's from Scotland. The island is still in Scotland, but there are like no people on this island. There's a bed and breakfast. There's a butcher. There's a church. And at the bed and breakfast, strangely, there's one other man staying there. And his name is Moses, and he is a vampire. And he's not a hottie, all right? This isn't about like hot, sexy vampires. He is gross. He is dirty and just like, ugh. But he's pretty much the only person that she's willing to talk to. And so they have this relationship where they basically just either sit in the kitchen or go for walks at the beach and talk about their life. And so we learn about her life through kind of those conversations. They tried to market this book as it being about like a sexual relationship with a vampire. It's not. But we're basically working through her past trauma of being raised Catholic, having that rip apart her family, having that just inject guilt into everything that she does, and this kind of obsession with being morally good. There's a lot of internalized homophobia that she has to work through. I thought it was really beautiful. I thought that the writing, the voice was very interesting. It was so kind of poetic and flowery, and then it would have just this kind of modern voice. I don't know how to explain it, but I really enjoyed it. And that's Fragile Animals. Yeah, not for everybody, but I do recommend, don't go in there looking for sexy vampires, because you will not find one. Not a one. That is Fragile Animals. Another contender for a book that, looking back, isn't going to be my favorite of the year for sure, but I just was really swept up with the vibes, the world building, everything about it. And that is The Whispering Dark. I talked about this recently. This is, if you've read The Raven Cycle, it is if Blue and Gansey were off on their own, if they met in college. Basically, this is the book. The Whispering Dark is about our main girl who had a near-death experience that caused her to lose her hearing. The author is also deaf, so just the details, like there were certain things that I just never thought of for people who are deaf. She has an implant, and so sometimes she had it turned off and couldn't hear things, and that would change the plot a little bit and blah, blah, blah. Like there were just these details that were thrown in to really add to the plot and the character, but I knew that it was coming from an educated, good place. She got a scholarship to go to a university, and she's very excited because this is her first time being able to go out on her own. She's always felt very sheltered because of her deafness. Her parents kind of don't let her have too much freedom. So now she's living in a dorm. She's moved to Boston, and she's going to study traveling between the veil. In this world, it's our modern day, but we have discovered how to pass through the veil in terms of the afterlife and now. That is what she is studying. From day one, she meets her teacher's assistant who somehow knows her. She doesn't know him, but he knows her. And we have to figure out why he knows her and what kind of trouble he's in and how do we get out of it. I just liked it. I think similar to the Raven Cycle, the world building isn't airtight. So a lot of questions are unanswered and you have to just kind of go with it. But I thought that the story moved in a way that it was okay. Like you just kind of got it. If you think too hard about it, it doesn't make sense. But if you just go with the flow, it's a fun time. Again, in terms of the vibe, it was very much just like autumn in Boston. There's a lot of imagery of like frozen ponds and drowning and demons and ghosts, time travel, almost immortality. I just really liked how it was set up. And then this isn't on my favorites list. However, I have a little PSA here. The author has just released her second book called Your Blood, My Bones. Your Bones, My Blood. I forget what it's called. She just released that, and as I was reading it, I was like, ooh, okay, great vibes as well. Totally a standalone. But as I continued towards the end of the book, actually, all of a sudden these characters were mentioned, and I was like, that's weird that she, like, does she just really like that name? She had a side character in Whispering Dark that had the same name. That's funny. And then as I continued, turns out a lot of the characters from Whispering Dark are in Your Blood, My Bones, and it does spoil it. So even though they are not connected in terms of plot, those characters do show up in her second book, and it does definitely spoil the ending of the Whispering Dark. So if you want to read Your Blood, My Bones, you have to read the Whispering Dark first. If you have no interest in the Whispering Dark, okay, you don't need to read it. Like, you can read it without. You can read this one without this one, but if you ever do want to read Whispering Dark, please read it first to avoid spoilers. Okay? Okay. But yeah, The Whispering Dark. Speaking of vibes, I have such a weird relationship with Holly Black's books because even with The Cruel Prince, I really hated it the first time I read it, specifically the first book. I really didn't like it. And now it's one that it's a comfort reread for me. I really enjoy it. The Stolen Heir, I wasn't super into it on the first read, but then as I reread it in order to get ready for The Prisoner's Throne, I suddenly found this love for it. The Prisoner's Throne, I felt like, but now having gone back and like reread certain parts, and I also have a friend who's obsessed with it, and she keeps sharing quotes and like making these really good TikToks about it. So all of a sudden I'm like, wait, yeah, that book was really good. I will say it was a weird reading experience, but in terms of just the general vibes and the feeling of being in that world, reading those two books back to back, being in that world for a full week, I will give it the shout out that it deserves. So The Stolen Heir is a continuation of The Cruel Prince. So we actually follow Oak, who is the complicated, but like a younger sibling of many of the characters in The Cruel Prince. That family tree, Holly, what are you doing? Anyway, we follow Oak, who is a prince who is on a quest, and he ropes in someone who was a friend when he was younger, but they haven't seen each other in many years, who is a outcasted princess. They work together with another friend and then another friend, and they go on this quest through fairyland, whatever. Like I said, it was one that on the first read of both of the books, I didn't love them. And then when I returned to them both, I found such a renewed respect and love of this story. So if you didn't like it the first time, if you DNF'd it, I would recommend reading it again. If you liked it the first time, wow, you beat me to it. But I will say I did enjoy it. The Stolen Heir. Holly Black she does fairy tales so well. She deserves her ears. That is The Stolen Heir. Next up, another series. This, I can't believe I'm putting it on my favorites, honestly, because it ruined my life. And I can't say that the books are good. How do I explain this? The books are good. The writing, beautiful. Beautiful writing. What she is doing to us, the audience, the readers, is sick and twisted. So I can't say the pacing is good. I don't agree with what she's doing, but I'm along for the ride whether I like it or not, and that is This Woven Kingdom. Yes, I read all 3 books back to back to back, and it is not a trilogy. It is not a trilogy. This is from the author of Shatter Me, so I feel like I should have known what I was getting myself into, but this is totally different from Shatter Me. Shatter Me is written in such early 2000s, edgy girl, like, I am death incarnate and all of this stuff. This Woven Kingdom is not. It is much more poetic and lyrical in its writing. Sometimes a little bit too much. I do think that there are times when you can call something just red and that's okay, instead of saying that it is a crimson ruby blah, blah, blah. You know, I kind of felt like, especially in the later books, every sentence she kind of pulled out a thesaurus and chose like every complicated word, literally for word count. Like instead of saying she looked at the book, she would say she looked at the stack of pages wrapped in a binding. And you know, it's like okay, we understand that you want to get this book to 500 pages, but does it need to be 500 pages? This Woven Kingdom is inspired by Persian mythology. We follow a girl who is working as a maid in a household. I don't want to spoil anything, so what we know of her in the beginning is simply that she has a secret. She has a reason for not wanting to be noticed. She wants to just put her head down and be a maid, sometimes also be a seamstress, and that's it. We have another POV, which is a prince who is dealing with his grandfather, who is kind of ready to give up the throne, but his main worry is that there was a prophecy about someone rising from the shadows and stealing his throne. Again, no spoilers, but somehow these two cross paths and chaos ensues. So the first book, I wasn't quite sure in the beginning how much I loved it, because both of the characters were a little bit closed off, and I felt like the writing was so beautiful and descriptive and kind of dreamy. I felt like I wasn't properly introduced to the characters. Then especially once they meet and we start to see their personalities bounce off of each other, that's when I felt like I really understood who each character was, and that's when I was really invested in the story. I thought the ending of the first book was impeccable. If I had read that without the second book having already been out, I think I would have lost my mind. So I'm very happy to have chosen to have started the series once 3 books are already out. However, my bone to pick is that the second and third book collectively take place over, I would say, maybe 2 weeks. Time passes like molasses. It is so slow. Especially the third book was very much just conversations that were kind of meant to be funny and to help build up the side character stories, but it was just, the plot was stagnant. So what it did was make the slow burn slow and burning. So I'm invested, but I'm also like, if we don't get something happening by the 4th book, I don't know if I would continue it. As much as I love the world and the characters, I just can't put myself through reading nothing for another like 300 to 400 pages. So I really hope that she ups the pacing in the next book. But if you do like a slow burn and you like a fantasy that has beautiful writing in it, truly she has some lines that are just like, oh, frame that. I would like that tattooed on my body. She's an incredible writer, but she pulls that slow burn real thin, and I think it would serve her better to speed it up. That being said, still recommend you try it, especially just the first book. Thought was great. This Woven Kingdom. Now, if you want romance that is slightly slow burn, but you don't want to have to read like over 1,000 pages to get them to hold hands. Actually, I don't even think that they held hands in this Woven Kingdom yet. Anyway, if you want something that is a standalone and is just lovey-dovey, cute, I recommend most ardently. This is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. If Elizabeth Bennet were a trans boy named Oliver, it's pretty much the exact story of Pride and Prejudice in terms of the journey that all the other side characters go on, but instead we follow Oliver and Darcy as their relationship blossoms, and I just thought it was really cute. Like that's exactly what it is. You know, I really enjoyed it. I will say, I said this in my first review of it, but just in case it makes you uncomfortable reading it, Oliver is not out to the rest of his family other than Charlotte, his aunt and uncle, and Jane. So he's constantly dead named, forced to wear dresses, behave as a proper young lady. That goes on for most of the book. So just go into it knowing that. But I thought it was really lovely. It makes me cry just like Pride and Prejudice does every single time. I think just because I know the story of Pride and Prejudice so well, I went into it like knowing all of the beats that we were going to hit. And so it was just, I don't know, a comfortable, easy read. It felt like I was having a comfort reread of Pride and Prejudice, but it had a new flavor and I adored. That is Most Ardently, and it's got a great cover. Okay, I preemptively changed my battery so that I am not interrupted as I talk about our last two books. Have you heard me talk about this yet? This is Five Broken Blades. I got this from Book of the Month. I was excited about it, but I didn't have any super high hopes. I was just like, this is probably going to be a fun time. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. I compared it to Six of Crows. Many people have compared it to Six of Crows. I stand by it. People were kind of up in arms because I made a TikTok about it right after I finished it. I made a video and I said that it was better in some ways than Six of Crows. People hear better and then they don't listen to the rest of the sentence. But also in some ways so much better. In some ways. I don't think that this was better than Six of Crows. I think it had elements to it that were better than Six of Crows, because one main complaint people have about Six of Crows is that these kids are so young, which I agree. I try not to think about the age of the characters of the Six of Crows. All of these characters are in their 30s or mid 20s or early 20s. Anyway, these are all adults. We have an assassin, we have a spy master, and they all have decades of experience to fall back on instead of like a decade ago Kaz was like learning to read. Okay, like it just makes a little bit more sense that these are adults. We follow 6 different POVs of people with various specialties, such as being an assassin, a poison maiden, someone who has been trained to be immune to poisons and thus she can use poisons to kill anybody that her boss tells her to. There's a hitman, there is a thief, again, a spy master, there's a prince, just a really fun group of characters. I will say that the first POV is rough. The POV of the hitman, I didn't like it. It uses a lot of like gotta, shoulda, ain't. Like he says things like, oh, I ain't gonna do nothing. But it's also not consistent. Sometimes he will say, oh, there's nothing I can do. You know, like he doesn't keep up that. So I will say the first POV is rough. But they're all really quick, and I think that's hit or miss for some people. Some of these POVs are like 3 pages long, and then you switch. I thought it made the action move really quickly, and I was always engaged. Some people said that they thought the voices sounded the same. I don't really think so. Not in a way that affected anything negatively. And yeah, I enjoyed. They all get together because they're going to assassinate the king, but the king is immortal, maybe. So they need to get a little creative with how they're going to kill him. There is a twisty ending. Oh my goodness. And yeah, I just had a really good time. I don't know what else to say. It was very fun. And I'm really excited for the next book. She has already announced the title and the cover is coming soon. So I think it will be churned out quickly, which is nice to hear because of that ending. Yes, there is magic, but it's not as magical as Six of Crows, I would say. I got a lot of people asking, like, I'm not going to read it unless there are queer characters. Many a queer character in here. It's not really smutty. There is definitely romance, but it's just to make the plot messy, honestly. And if there is any like potential smut, it's pretty much off the page. But it still is kind of a lot of yearning and a lot of betrayal. So much betrayal. Five Broken Blades. I recommend it fully. And last but not least is the book that I'm currently reading, and I really tried to finish it before I filmed this video. I'm at 45%, and I really like it. So I'm willing to put it on this list tentatively, okay? Know that I haven't finished it yet, but so far it's looking real good. I'm currently working on a video in which you guys recommended books to me that I haven't read, but you think based on my taste, I would rank them as 5 stars. And this one, you got me. So this is a little bit of a spoiler for next week, but I would like to recommend The Library of the Unwritten. This is about a library in hell, which is where all unfinished stories go to die, basically. If an author doesn't finish their work, it sits in this library. If the books aren't kind of managed correctly, sometimes the books will turn into one of their characters, like a character from the story will escape. They need to be like brought back into the book. And so we follow our librarian and her assistant, who that's their entire job. And it's difficult to describe the plot, but eventually it becomes an issue where Hell and all of the demons and librarians are racing the angels to find this one particular book. They found a scrap of a book. They need to find the rest of the book. So it's this huge kind of mystery race. It's a book about books. It's a book about the afterlife. There's hell, but there's also Valhalla. There's all the different afterlives. So we have to like go to each one to pick up different clues. We go to the real world. We have some characters that are simply characters from a book. I can't describe much more of it without kind of spoiling it, because I think that all the little tidbits that you learn throughout the story, like the way that it unfolds, is great. I had an issue in the beginning getting into it just because honestly I was in a really crowded, noisy cafe. So part of it was I just couldn't concentrate, but I wasn't quite sure where it was going. But once we meet all the characters, I really loved it. It just has such a wicked sense of humor. I'm having such a wonderful time. So if you like books about books and stories and writing, it's quite meta, because I feel like the author maybe wrote this because they were having such a hard time finishing a book. So it's about the struggle of writing, the need for imagination and muses. Yeah, it just had everything. Again, a whole like God figure that maybe isn't benevolent or maybe isn't perfect or maybe isn't all-knowing. I'm just having a really good time. Angels that are sassy and stubborn, I really enjoy books about that. So yeah, that is what I'm currently reading, and it's looking bright in terms of will this be a favorite or not. And that is The Library of the Unwritten. So that's my list so far of books that I have really enjoyed. It's funny that some of them are like books that I put on this list, but I'm still not sure I enjoyed. So yeah, please let me know what some of your favorites are. You guys are so far killing it with the books you recommended for me that you think I would rate as 5 stars. So keep it up. I will post my, I guess, results of the study next week. So I'll see you then. Once again, thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this. There will be a link down below, but you can go to squarespace.com/caricanread to get 10% off of your first purchase. Highly recommend. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. I hope that you're having a better reading month. I think I already said this, but collectively, we all had kind of a rough April. Hope that turns around. Let me know your thoughts on 5 Broken Blades. I definitely know that I'm still riding a high from this because I had read such kind of mediocre books for a month and a half, and then getting this, I felt like so happy. I know that I'm still riding the high, but I do genuinely think it was a fun time. So let me know your thoughts, especially on this. I will catch you next time. Okay, I'm gonna go get lunch and continue reading about Hell's favorite librarian, and it's gonna be great. Thank you always. Okay,